Yes, I can remember erosion problems that we had to deal with when I was growing up on the farm. Gully erosion problems. Some of the land that was farmed in that area had a lot of roll to it, a lot of slope to it. And back then, the main way that it was dealt with was putting in a good system of terraces. Terraces, in some cases waterways, to just shorten the length of the slope and prevent that gully erosion from happening. Back then, the idea of managing your residue really wasn't a concept. That wasn't something that was being utilized then. The main thing was just putting in the terraces if you really had an erosion problem, and that would usually not always eliminate the problem, but at least help it. One thing I think when we're talking about cover crops is a number of different species that can be used for cover crops. In the upper part of the state, you see legumes being used some. In the coastal plain area, one problem we have here that we don't have as much with the Piedmont type soils is nematodes. And we have to remember that a lot of your legume cover crops, they're going to serve as an excellent host for nematodes. And when I say an excellent host, I don't mean that in a positive way, because nematodes, that's a problem we want to avoid with our row crops. And anytime you're planting a crop in the field, a cover crop that's going to host the nematode, you run the risk of increasing that population on into the next growing season. So I think with a legume cover crop, the best thing to do in most situations, if you have a field where nematodes are a problem, would be to avoid a legume cover crop altogether. Otherwise, if you're going to plant a legume crop, you need to make sure you plant it late enough and kill it early enough so that it doesn't have time to really become an active host to the nematodes. Rye, wheat, and oats, your small grains, are your common cover crops. I would say rye would be the most common. Rye does tend to provide you more residue, which is a plus. I would say the main thing you have to watch with a rye cover crop would be as we get on into the late winter and into the spring, if we're having pretty good moisture, it will start to grow in a hurry. You have to make sure it doesn't get away from you and get too tall, because then it can be more of a problem burning down the cover crop, and also you can have more problems with interference with the planting equipment. So with rye, it's an excellent cover crop, but you do have to make sure you burn it down. Rye is an excellent cover crop. It will give you more residue than your other small grains. You tend to get a good germination rate with it planting. One problem with rye is if you're not careful, if you're having good moisture in the spring, it will start to grow in a hurry and it can get away from you. So you have to make sure you burn it down with a herbicide early enough that it's not going to get too tall where it becomes a problem and interferes with your planting equipment. Wheat and oats are other cover crops that are used some, and they have their place also. They're not going to give you the amount of residue that rye does. I would say if you're going to be following a cover crop with corn, rye is going to be your best bet because it's going to give you your most growth prior to planting the corn. If you're looking at a later planted spring crop such as soybeans, cotton, or peanuts, rye is still a good choice. Just keep in mind you've got to burn it down before it gets too tall. With your better soils, you tend to have better winter weed growth. I mean, your more productive soils for cropland also tend to be more productive for some of your weed species. So when you've got more, some of your heavier lands, less sandy lands, they're going to tend to have a better cover of winter weeds than some of your real deep sandy lands. And if you've got a good cover of winter weeds, it will help some during the late fall, winter, early spring, preventing soil erosion, preventing runoff, preventing wind erosion, the blowing sand. And it will give you more residue to plant into with your strip till or no-till planted spring crop. And that residue is going to carry on into the spring for a while, where you're going to tend to have less runoff and less erosion problems. Now, the winter weed residue tends to break down pretty quick. Once you burn it down with a herbicide, and with the climate we have around here, the more humid conditions, warmer temperatures, it's not going to be long into the spring before a lot of that residue from the winter weeds has pretty much disappeared. No, I haven't. I've read some of the research on it, and I know it has potential. We don't have any farmers in this area that are doing that. One thing I would say about cover crops, and I think this would be something to consider as far as rolling the cover crop, cutworms can become a problem with certain row crops, in particular cotton. And I have seen situations where a farmer waited until, say, a week before planting, or maybe even right after planting before they burned down the cover crop. There were already cutworms in the field. They moved straight from the cover crop to the seedling of the emerging cotton. And I have seen cotton fields where they were practically wiped out due to a cutworm population. And it's very important to, with a cover crop, to make sure you burn it down, preferably 3 or more weeks prior to planting with cotton, to make sure you starve out the existing cutworm population. Cutworms can be a problem with other row crops as well, but particularly with cotton. So getting back to your question about rolling the cover crop, I would think that could be a potential problem there as well, if there again you're in a field where cutworms have been a problem in the past.
Hang on just a minute, let me frame.
I would say anyone that's switching from conventional tillage to any type of residue management, strip till or no-till system, a couple of things they need to be mindful of. First, make sure you've got your pH levels adequate before you switch over to a conservation tillage system, because in a conventional tillage system you're incorporating your lime, which means it's going to be pretty much active within 3 months. In any type of residue management system, whether it's strip till or no-till, not all of the lime is going to be incorporated if you're going with a continuous strip till system. So it's important to have your pH level up to an adequate level to begin with, and also you have to anticipate what your lime needs are going to be ahead of time, because the lime's not going to move into the root zone as quickly, so you have to again anticipate, make sure you're getting the lime out so that in the future years your pH level in the root zone is going to be where it needs to be. One other thing I would mention, some farmers have found that their starter fertilizer is a little more important in a strip till or a no-till system than a conventional till system. Some tend to vary their rate of particularly their nitrogen, and in some cases the phosphorus and other micronutrients. They vary the rate a little bit when they have moved to a strip till or no-till system. Others have not made any changes at all and hadn't found that there was really any difference either way. A lot of farmers have not changed their fertility program that much when they switch from conventional till to a strip till or no-till system. Most in either situation are banning their phosphorus. The potash is, in a lot of cases it is being broadcast, but it's based on the need that the soil test results show. And of course your nitrogen is going to be pretty much the same under any tillage situation. So I would say your nutrient management isn't necessarily going to vary that much short term. Now long term, as you improve your soil quality, you can see some differences that will affect the amount of fertilizer you're using. How much residue you want and how much residue you need really depends on your field conditions and your objectives. If you have a field that's got a lot of slope to it, that's more prone to soil erosion and water runoff, you're going to need more residue than if it's a fairly flat field, where water erosion or soil erosion isn't really a big problem. So the amount of residue as it pertains to soil erosion, a lot depends on your field conditions. Now, the other thing that has to be remembered there is, as far as residue is, would be what are your goals as far as trying to improve your soil quality, trying to increase the amount of organic matter you have in your soil. The more residue that you're keeping in the field year after year, the better chance you have of improving your soil quality by increasing the organic matter in it. Long term, there should be benefits there. So when you're trying to decide, well, how much residue I need, a lot of it depends on your field conditions and also what your objectives are. If with some row planted crops like corn, for instance, you're going to have adequate residue for most situations. With a row crop like peanuts, the residue is very limited. So when you after harvesting your peanuts, that's when you'd be most likely to want to consider a cover crop. With row crops like cotton and soybeans, they're somewhere in between your corn and your peanuts. For certain field conditions, you've really got adequate residue there and the opportunity to improve your soil quality. If you got a field that's got a lot of slope to it and is really prone to erosion, in some situations you may want to consider a cover crop there.